Today I am here with Sandra Elia. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us today. I've actually been really looking forward to speaking with you. How are you doing on this fine sunny day?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing wonderful. Excited to be here.
That's great. So for those of you who don't know Sandra already, let me give you a brief introduction. Sandra is a certified food addiction counselor and a trailblazer in the field of addictive eating. Her expertise has brought about partnerships with the Canadian top obesity and addiction doctors, and her food addiction recovery program has yielded tremendous success. Patients report improved health, improved sense of well-being, and most importantly, changing their relationship with food. Sandra created and runs Canada's only outpatient food addiction recovery program, and she's co-creator of Canada's first 28-day residential treatment program for food addiction at Renaissance Addiction Rehab Center in Toronto. Sandra knows firsthand about the struggle with living with obesity. She has lived two lives, one of a morbid obese woman for 15 years, and she experienced a world that's not made for her size, seeking assistance from biased healthcare providers and dealing with fat shaming. Since those difficult days, Sandra has transformed her life and her body, losing over 100 pounds. Sandra is dedicated to changing the conversation so that anyone living with obesity has access to treatment that is steeped with dignity, respect, and understanding. Sandra, what a really inspiring story. And what I love and what's really incredible is how you're taking that to the next level, not just for yourself and transforming yourself, but for helping others. That's so amazing. Now, so on your incredible journey, maybe you could share a bit about that journey. What were some of your key lessons on your journey that for yourself? And I guess one of my questions is, did you do it by yourself? Or did you have help?
So if I think back to that time in my life, which now is 20 years ago, a long time ago, but I can still get there very easily because it was such a sad time in my life. And I still have some friends from that time, and they will tell you that I had some of the saddest eyes that you would ever imagine, which to me says everything, because nobody today meets me and describes me as having sad eyes, but I certainly did in my 20s. And to help people understand what food addiction is, I try to explain that it's not about eating, it's about using. So using food in a similar way as somebody who is living with alcoholism uses alcohol. And that helps frame the discussion for what food addiction is, because at the end of the day, we all use food sometimes for comfort or boredom relief, but that's very different from addiction. And that's what we're talking about today, addiction. And so just like the person living with alcoholism, they can't really enjoy a glass of wine and move on with their day like somebody who isn't living with that. And so it is with the food addict. I used food to numb pain, to escape traumatizing thoughts from my childhood, to feel comforted. It was my consolation prize. It was the way to cope with a life that was spiraling out of control. And that's another indicator of food addiction. So my weight and my eating was affecting every area of my life. So my marriage was breaking down. I was in a very enmeshed, codependent relationship with my mom, who was living with bipolar disorder and obesity herself. I was my mental health was taking a huge hit, and I was on extended sick leave from work. So really sad, rock bottom area of my life. And at that time in my life, in my 20s, I just thought, if I could find a perfect diet, if I could just have figured out how to be skinny, everything else would fall into place. I really believe that. And the truth is, if I could have figured out how to be skinny, I would have never changed. I wouldn't. I would have stayed in that, you know, spiraling life with the bad marriage and the depression, and filled with hatred for myself, for others, for the world, I would have just stayed there, because all I wanted was to be skinny. And because I couldn't be skinny, that was the fuel that spurred me on to change as a person. So in a way, I'll always be grateful for food addiction, because I have to live a certain way in order to stay in recovery. And it was only when two pivotal things happened 20 years ago. One is when I started treating my weight and my eating as an addiction, was I able to have some success and release 100 pounds. Dieting only left me, I could lose a little bit, rebound. But when I rebound and gained a little more. Lost, rebound, gained a little more. And I went on my very last restrictive diet when I was about, I would say 27, 28 years old. And I managed to lose 50 pounds in 6 months. What I didn't know was I also managed to kick in the starvation mode in your brain. So that's a real thing. That's a medical real thing, that when we restrict our calories too much and lose weight too quickly, a cascade of events happens in our brain that drives us to seek food and find food and eat as much food as possible, because your brain thinks it's a famine. It has no idea it's an artificial famine that I imposed, and it's a matter of life and death. So that was the first thing. I had to treat my eating as an addiction. And the second thing was I really had to let go of the scale. So I was over 260 pounds, and I said, whether I lose another pound or not, I do not care, because I was a compulsive weigher. I would weigh myself in the morning, at lunch, and dinner. I don't know what I thought I would find. Like, clearly the weight was going to go up, but I did. And when I decided it just didn't matter if I ever lost a pound again, because I just couldn't keep living the way I was living, and I couldn't keep eating the way I was eating. I had to find some sanity around food. Yeah.
Wow. So really, when it came down to it, it was really about changing, I guess, letting go of your weight, and that whole idea was a big key of that.
Yeah, my whole life I was changing a goal weight, and I did manage to get down to my lowest goal weight during a relapse. Then that spurred a relapse, and nothing changed. I remember that. I remember when I had hit that magic number that I had wanted my whole life, and I was crazy with food. I was sad. I was alone. I was dissatisfied. And I probably stayed at that goal weight for all of 10 minutes, maybe. I can't remember. But it didn't bring me anything that I had hoped it would have.
Yeah.
So today I just say my weight is none of my business. Clearly, none of my business. My business is to eat whole, fresh foods, move my body, have a spiritual practice, and then wherever my weight ends up, it ends up. Because I got to enjoy this body today, because I'm never getting this day back. And I got to honor and love this body without condition. That was the real work. So all of us, the collective we, think the real work is I got to find the right diet, and I got to stick to it, and I got to have willpower. And I really believe the real work is unconditional love and acceptance for yourself. So I teach my clients every morning, we get up and we try to hit bullseye on our recovery. And so that means avoiding our trigger foods, our drug foods, and living a life that's got meaning. And when we hit bullseye, it's amazing, right? You've had those days where everything's like bullseye. And then the days that you miss bullseye, those days are even richer. Those are the days that you practice self-compassion and self-love, because in that state, you can actually learn why you hit bullseye. So it's so important for me and for my clients never again to feel like a failure. Because if you've struggled with your weight or your eating for years or decades, you begin to believe you're the failure, right? You internalize, well, I can't stick to a diet, I can't lose weight, I must be the failure. And so my program is the exact opposite. Like, there's no failing. You hit bullseye, the rewards are rich. You miss it, that's even more valuable, because that's where you grow as a person.
That's amazing. I love that. That's so great. So maybe you've been talking about it, but maybe we can go a little deeper about what exactly food addiction is. Like, how do I know if I have a food addiction versus, I just have a few extra pounds or something,
Yeah.
and we have to let go of that. I have a few extra pounds. And how do we identify if this is an issue for us? Like,
So first of all, food addicts don't necessarily carry extra weight. This
Mhm.
is more about an addiction, an obsession of the mind, just food taking up a lot of mental real estate, because I have worked with food addicts who are of a normal weight, we'll say, or not normal, healthy, because there's no normal. So food addiction is really classified as a disease. And this disease, what happens is you lose the ability to eat certain foods. So you lose control. Once you start on certain foods, it's very hard to have a reasonable portion, and eating these trigger foods often leads to an overeating episode. What are these foods? They're generally ultra processed, chemically engineered foods. They contain sugar, fat, salt, flour. They've been made in a factory. They're nutrient poor. They're disease causing. And for some of us, those foods overwhelm our reward center and makes them highly rewarding, thus leading to addiction. And we don't know why some people it will turn into addiction and others we won't. Just like alcohol, right? Alcohol affects you at the reward center. For some people, they will never develop alcoholism. Other people will develop it maybe after their first drink even. So that's an important distinction, is understanding that it is a drive and a hunt and having extremely overwhelming cravings for certain foods. Now, there are three major hallmarks when it comes to addiction that we can apply to food addiction. So the first one is what we call withdrawal. So when you try to stop the substance, so let's say the substance is sugar, and bread turns into sugar, pasta turns into sugar, and then sugar is sugar, refined sugar. I don't need to tell everybody what that is, the cookies, the cakes, and all that. That when you stop, you begin to experience withdrawal. That withdrawal can be physiological, psychological, and it's quite painful. Now, here's the thing with sugar that's very interesting, because you'll probably see tons of sugar-free challenges. So people who don't identify as food addicts, who try to stop sugar, go through withdrawal, and it's nasty. They got headaches, they're irritable, their families like, eat a cookie, just stop being so miserable. So withdrawal is even for those who don't suffer. The next hallmark of addiction is called tolerance. So that means that there was a time, maybe if you had a box of cookies, that you could eat 3 and put the box away. And then over time, it was like, no, you got to eat the whole roll. I can't stop. And then, later on, when addiction's really taken over, you're like, I cannot be at peace with an open box. I have to eat every single one for the obsession to go away. So that's increased tolerance, where you could get away with a few, then a row, and then it's the whole box. And then the last definite hallmark of addiction is that you have consequences from your weight or your eating that you desperately do not want. So diabetes, depression, mobility issues, you name it.
Mhm.
You don't want those consequences, and yet you cannot stop despite having those consequences.
And knowing and wanting to stop, right?
And knowing and wanting, and just being like, maybe it's you're pre-diabetic and the doctor is like, you're on your way to diabetes and you desperately do not want to be diabetic, but you can't stop.
Okay. And I know, there's tons of different types of addiction out there. You mentioned alcohol, which is one that's talked about a lot. There's other types of addiction, but there has to be something unique about food, because we need food. It's our fuel. It's what keeps us going. We need it to survive. So, and there's no way to really escape that. And food is, well, I guess alcohol is too, but it's also, a very social thing. How does that impact your treatment and how people are able to fare?
Yeah, I've been quite fortunate that I've been able to partner with some of the top obesity doctors here in Canada, as you mentioned. But when I first tried to break into this field, I would get that argument. You can't be addicted to food because you need food to survive. But the truth is, nobody, or I shouldn't say nobody, Almost nobody is addicted to whole natural foods. No one goes home at night after a really stressful, terrible day and says, I'm going to have a pound and a half of salmon and a bushel of broccoli until I don't feel any more pain, right? Because you can't. You actually can't. Your body reacts to whole natural foods in a natural way. All that chewing, all that fiber, all those nutrients, your brain is going to be screaming, stop, stop. Like it, they've even done studies where they try to incentivize people, so give them money to binge on whole single ingredient foods. It's nearly impossible because our body is really, it's like trying to hold your breath. Now, that is not true when we talk about these chemically engineered foods, because the food industry puts a lot of science into making sure they hit the bliss point. So it's a perfect combinations of sugar, fat, salt. So we're actually not talking about drugs. And I get it. It's confusing. A Dorito looks like food, but it's not. Yeah, I promise you it is not food. If you look at the block of ingredients, you will see there is more chemical with a sprinkling of maybe potato, but it's mostly chemical, just like cocaine actually comes from the cocoa leaf. And there was a time in history when a man or woman came across the cocoa leaf and they would just chew on the leaf and get a little spurt of energy to make it, on with their day. But humans came along and they processed it into cocaine and crack cocaine, which is highly addictive. So that's food addiction is the best term we have thus far. It's not the most accurate because, as I mentioned, we're not addicted to real foods, but maybe it's a processed food addiction. Maybe we call it a sugar addiction. And with those, you can overdo it easily. Like, for example, you probably could not eat 4 avocados, right? That would be really tough and probably sounds pretty unappetizing, even if you love avocados. And I'm not talking about guac with chips, just avocados, versus 4 jumbo, warm, gooey chocolate chip cookies. Those are not a problem for anyone like me, and they have the same calories. But the 4 would not be a problem for me to have. And then it would ignite, I would have an unnatural response. I wouldn't be satiated. I'd be like, oh my God, what's next? What else can I get my hands on? What else can I eat? So if you can relate to that, then you may be dealing with food addiction.
And you just have to watch on TV. If somebody's down, they bring out the tub of ice cream.
I know.
Or like you said, the cookies, or the other one that I find interesting is the bag of potato chips. Like, who
can't have one? I bet you just can't have one. Everyone knows what commercial that is, right?
Yeah.
Potato chips. Well, potato chips is the #1 most addictive food on the planet. Is it #1? No, it's #3. #1 is pizza. #2 is chocolate. #3 is potato chips.
Yeah. All right. Mm-hmm. But I have a daughter that can eat a little bowl.
Yeah.
Put them away and she's fine.
Yeah, just like the person who enjoys a glass of wine.
Yeah.
Maybe that person, even once in a while, has 3 glasses of wine.
Yeah.
And goes to town one night and then they don't drink again for 3 weeks. They're fine. They just indulged one night.
Yeah. And so how do you actually treat, now you have somebody who identifies that they have a problem. How do you treat them? What do you do for treatment?
Mm-hmm. So I have the 3 pillars of food addiction recovery, which is in my book that just launched.
Awesome.
It launched on Saturday. So
wow.
Never enough. The 3 pillars of food addiction recovery. So this book is part memoir, part workbook, and the 3 pillars. So I want you to think about the 3 pillars as building your house of recovery. And so at the base, everybody needs to create a foundation, which is internal, that is kind, that is gentle, that is nurturing. Why? Because we all flourish in that kind of environment. All of us, we need that kind of environment to be able to change. No one changes in a constructive manner when motivated by shame, guilt, or hate. How many times, anyone who's listening, how many times did you start a diet or change the way you eat or move your body filled with shame, guilt, or hate, right? A lot of us. That's the only way I started a diet on Monday morning. It would be like, I hate myself. I can't stand to be in my own skin. I'm embarrassed. I'm disgusted. Now I'm going to do keto. And I don't even like eating keto, but they said that I'll lose weight fast and it'll be effortless. So sign me up because I can't stand myself, right? It says that's the way we always start. No one starts with, I've forgiven myself. I can see the beauty. And I love myself as I am unconditionally, which means the way I love myself today will be the same when I lose some weight. That's unconditional love. And so we need that foundation. And then it's a 3-legged stool. I say if you ignore one of the legs, it'll be hard to stay up. So the first leg is eliminating our trigger foods. These are our drug foods, the ones that we obsess about. Once we start, very hard to have a reasonable portion and lead to an overeating episode. And I know in my own story, if I could just avoid those trigger foods, then I had a chance because it wouldn't ignite the compulsive overeating. The second pillar is to be part of a community. You need a community of people. And I think COVID taught us that, right? If you think back to the pandemic, and, I lived in Toronto, Ontario, which was one of the most locked down cities in the world. Oh my God, it used to make me crazy. We also had the highest vaccination rates and the most lockdown for the longest. We had lockdowns for 2 years, sometimes 3 to 6 months at a time. And what did I miss? People. That's what we missed. I didn't miss anything else. The hardest was the isolation and being alone. So that really helped solidify why one of the pillars has to be community support. People getting up, trying to do exactly what you're trying to do each and every day. We're going to cheer you on when you do well and support you when you fall down. The third pillar is spirituality and mindfulness. So if you've struggled with your weight for years or decades, like myself, it chips away your self-esteem. And so spirituality is a remembering. It's a remembering of your worthiness. We all come into this world perfect little beings with the spark of the divine inside of us. We have that magnificence inside of us, but we lose our connection. Why? Because sad stuff happens to us, scary stuff happens to us, traumatizing stuff happens. We lose that connection and we start to use food for comfort. And then sometimes for some of us, that comfort becomes an addiction. So spirituality is just remembering of your worthiness, connecting to that magnificence, living from that magnificence. And what we're trying to achieve at the top of the house is peace with food. That's it. What is peaceful for you? That's why I never tell my clients what to eat or not to eat, because if I go back to the Doritos, if you can tell me, like your daughter, you can take out a little bowl and you can have a few Doritos and then wrap it up and put it away. Why would you give up Doritos? You're fine. It's peaceful for you. It has its right place. But for many of us, it's not the case. We know that once we open that bag, there's no chance we're going to be able to stop until it's all gone. And the minute it's gone, we're going to be filled with remorse and guilt and self-hatred, and it's going to make us spiral. So there's no peace. There's no peace in that.
Yeah. And I think as well, sometimes you can, like with the diet, you can do it for a while and you think that you're in control and you can have a few. Yeah. But it just kind of starts piling up again.
Moderation. Moderation doesn't generally work for addicts, no matter what the drug is. I think you mentioned at the beginning, it's a little more difficult for the food addict because, so what we know from research is if somebody's recovering from a cocaine addiction, if we show them drug paraphernalia, their dopamine is going to surge and cravings are going to surge just by them seeing drug paraphernalia. Well, with the food addict, our paraphernalia is a fork, a knife, a plate, right? It's really, really tough.
Yeah, and just go to any grocery store. Yeah. All those foods are presenting themselves.
Yeah, try to avoid the middle. Mind you, grocery stores are getting sneakier. So I always had the rule, I don't need to go to the middle unless I'm, getting, toilet paper or tuna or canned beans. But what they're doing now to catch you is by the strawberries, they're selling chocolate. And by the cheese, they're selling the crackers. So they're bringing the middle out to the peripherals because
Ah,
they figured, people are avoiding the middle and we're not getting sales. How do we make this more attractive? I had a client tell me she had gone to a drugstore here in Toronto, and they had female hygiene products and chocolate right beside one another, because they're playing on the idea that sometimes women who are PMSing crave chocolate. So they're like, here, you can get your sanitary products and a bar of chocolate at the same spot.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of ways that the food industry is trying to attract us to all these different foods and try and stay one step ahead of where we're at, for sure. Now, I just also, you talked about community, which I think is really important. And, in some of my travels, I hear, it's all, you have to have a peer group or community. It's really important. And I lived through the Toronto lockdown too.
Oh, you're in Toronto too. I didn't know.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so I lived through the Toronto lockdown, and I know exactly where you're coming from on that. I think you could shoot a cannon down Queen Street on, which is always bumper to bumper. But anyway, so when you were talking about community, how do you find that community that is supportive for yourself?
Yeah, well, definitely there's my community. I attract seekers. So I attract people really looking to heal the mind, the body, and the spirit. Beautiful community. So you can just head on over to my website at sandraelia.com. And also, there are 12-step programs. So what I like about 12-step programs are that they're available 7 days a week, almost every hour on the hour, because all the meetings went on Zoom. So that means if you needed a meeting at 2 in the morning, maybe you could attend one in Australia virtually, or in the UK, any English-speaking country. I say that, and I also know that 12-step programs don't work for everyone. But if they do, that's an excellent resource. And if they don't, that's one of the reasons I created my program, is for the people that 12-step didn't resonate for them.
Wow. So when you're looking at, for our audience today, what's one simple thing that they can do today to get started on making some positive changes to their health? What is to kind of, I could just start it today if I put my mind to it.
Yeah, go through your cupboards, throw out anything that has been highly processed. And I can already hear, oh, but my children need it, and my husband shouldn't be deprived, and my partner should, they don't have a problem. Well, that's true. But do you truly love them? And what is love? Is love giving them a factory made, nutrient poor, disease causing chemical food? That's what it is. It isn't love. It isn't being kind. And so I have an 11-year-old daughter, soon to be 12. She does not have eating issues like your daughter, thank God. But I don't stock the cupboards with that chemically engineered food. She has it. She absolutely has it, because there are so many opportunities out there, right? She'll go to her cousins and they'll have the Timbit cereal. She'll go to McDonald's, maybe with her stepsister. There's so many opportunities, right? It's not like I'm not saying don't, like you can't. But why should I have what I like? I tell her too, it's poison. It's poison in small amounts. Why would I have poison available at her fingertips? Why, if I truly love her?
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Know that they'll have it, but just don't make it so accessible that they can mindlessly eat it in front of the TV or in their room. And my daughter splits her time between me and her dad. And she came home one day and she's like, Daddy has a cupboard full of different kinds of potato chips and cookies. And why don't we? And I said, because your father already has it. So you don't need it here. You don't need it here. You've got plenty of options over there, and I can't control that, and that's okay. But I love her enough that it's not going to be at our fingertips. No, I do have snacky stuff. I do have like popcorns and like oatmeal cookies, and it's just not the super highly processed palatable stuff.
Very good. I love that. That's such a great